Hello everyone, this is Vishwas and welcome back to our micro front-end crash course series. This is seventh video of our series, and as a part of last video, we have explored how exactly we can do the state management in the micro front-end with the help of three different options. The first option we tried with a very simple way, that is passing the data as a props and lifting the state up. Then second approach we tried with React context, and the third approach we tried with lightweight state management library, that is Zustand. And as a part of today's video, let's explore how exactly we can do the state management with the help of Redux in micro front-end ecosystem. Now, for first 10 minutes, I will talk about the theory part of the Redux Toolkit, and will also explain how to use Redux or Redux Toolkit with React application. If you have understanding around that topic, you can skip the first 10 minutes and start from the next section. I will slice the section while uploading this video. When we talk about the Redux is a JavaScript library used for managing the application state. Primarily, it is known for its predictable state updates through the single store. That store is updated by dispatching the action from the component, and that action is processed by reducer. Reducers are the pure function that define how state changes in response to those actions. Essentially, Redux provide a structured way to manage the complex application data across the different components by keeping all the state in one place by updating it with clear instruction. If you look at this diagram, things are very simple. Consider our flow start with the components. Component basically dispatching the action. That action is reaches to reducer. Reducer process those actions, and based on action, it updates the store. Once store is updated, we have use selector kind of hook which subscribe to our store, and once store gets updated, it's update the necessary state in the components and our application gets reloaded. Now, when we talk about the Redux, we have three important concepts. The one is store, second one is actions, and third one is reducer. Store is central repository where entire application state is held, and that is accessible by all the components of that application. When you talk about the actions, actions are like a plain JavaScript object that describes what happened in the application. That means like we can add the item, we can delete the item, or we can add the user or delete the user. That is basically the type of the action, and along with that type, it also carry any necessary data that is related to change. Then we have reducers, right? Reducers are pure function that take the current state and action as an input and return the new state based on the action type. When we talk about the Redux, there are few key principles. Our store is single source of truth. That means all the application state is stored in the single store. Application state is read only. That means there is only one way to modify the state by dispatching the action, and only reducers are responsible to update our state or update our store. And third thing, reducer must be pure function. That means they always return the same output for the same input. Now, when we talk about the Redux require lots of boilerplate code and configuration to start with it. And now it is recommended way to use the next version of Redux, that is Redux Toolkit. When we talk about the Redux Toolkit, it is a set of tool built on top of the Redux library. It is designed to simplify the state management process. It offering the features like creating the slice by defining the reducers and its actions, and it also provide the configure store method for creating the Redux store, making it recommended way to use the Redux today. There are a couple of key components when we talk about the Redux toolkit. The first one is the create slice method. It is a function that help you to define the state slice with associated actions and reducers. And it reduces the required boilerplate code. That means instead of using the reducer directly, we are using the create slice method. And this create slice method internally using the reducers, and it exports few actions as well as required reducers. And finally, we have configure store method, and it is a function to create the Redux store. The store is basically use the reducer from our create slice. We can have the multiple slices, multiple reducers with it. And this configure store basically create the store, and it is often used with middleware like Redux Thunk to handle the asynchronous operation. Now, as you are watching micro frontend series, this is the advanced topic, and I am assuming that you have some basic understanding around the Redux or Redux toolkit. If you watched my previous video, we know that we are working on micro frontends with two different applications, right? Both the applications are in React, and now we will just understand how exactly we can use the Redux or Redux toolkit with React, right? Simple. First, let's talk about the Redux in short. When we integrate Redux with React, we need to basically install two packages. The first one is Redux and another one is React Redux. This React Redux is basically acts as a bridge between Redux and React. Then we are using create store method from Redux to create our store. It basically required the reducer. We are creating the reducers here. Then we define our actions. Those actions reaches to the reducer, update the data in reducer, and finally our store gets updated. And finally, as I mentioned, to make the bridge between React and Redux, we need providers component from our React Redux library. We basically wrap this component around our application with the required store so that all the application or all the components present inside this provider can access our store. Redux is basically old way of managing the state, right? Now, there is slightly difference between Redux Toolkit, and let's understand that as well. When we talk about the Redux Toolkit, we continuously using our React Redux package, and finally we also need this provider component from it to wrap it around our application. Only there are a couple of differences. Instead of using Redux, now we started using the Redux.js/toolkit package. From it, first we will import the configure store to create our store here, and we pass our reducers to it. We can have single or multiple reducers. And then we have create slice method to create the slices for our application. And when we talk about the create slice method, it takes object as a configuration, and we have three different properties. The first one is name of our slice, then initial state, and third parameter will be reducers. In reducers, we can add the different action, and finally we will export our actions as a named export and our reducer as a default export from it. This is all about the theory part. Now let's move to the VS Code, and first let's understand our application in short that we are working as the last video, and then we will continue working on our state management implementation with the help of Redux. Now in VS Code, we continue working on our folder number 6 that is related to state management. Here we already work on React context and state management with Zustand. And today what we will do, I just copy pasted the same code from Zustand folder and added it under the Redux folder. And today we will do our implementation here. Now, if you are following along with me in the last video, we are working on two different React applications. We have container application, that is our parent application, and our child application name is common components. Till now, our child application name we are using as a components, but I got some recommendation and people feel it confusing because we are using same component folder name in our React application as well to manage the application level components. So going forward, take a note of that, like our parent application name will be container and our child application name will be common components. Now I have run both the application, and if you go to Chrome, we will see our parent application is working as expected. In child application, we have this card component and we are passing data from parent to it. And when we click on add button in my child application, basically we are adding that state in the store and then we are showing that data in our parent application. Now, if you look at our application, first let's understand the parent application in short. Here we are using store from our last video, and this is implemented with the help of Zustand. If you come to bottom, we are just exporting the use card store here. And if you go to Webpack config file, we are using the module federation plugin and we are exposing our store from it. When we are exposing the store, it will be available to use by our child application. Now, when we go to our child application and look for our Webpack config file, here in module federation plugin, we are basically using the instance of our parent application through remote entry.js file. And now if you go to the components and look for our card details component, we are using the use card store from our container, that is parent application, and we are using store from it. We are using the set card store method, and when we click on that add button, we are basically taking that new item and passing that item again back to the set card. This set card is available in our parent application store component. Now go to parent application again, and if you go to store, we will see here we are using that set card method. Here we are getting that new item, and then we have logic to update our cart. Finally, we are getting all the cart data in cart variable. Then if you look at our Webpack config file, again, we are using the same instance of our parent application here because we need to make sure that whatever store we are using in child and parent component, that should store the common instance. Now, if I go to my header component, right, we will see here we are using the container store again, and we are using that cart object. This is implemented with the help of Zustand, and we simplified our logic a lot. And now instead of Zustand, we will use Redux to manage the state in our React microfrontends. Now let's start with actual implementation. First, let me go to my container application and look for our store.js file, right? Till now, we have all the implementation in Zustand, and now what we will do, we will remove all this code, and then we will work on installing the Redux Toolkit, and we will create our store with the help of Redux. If we look at here, we have some existing code, right? And this code is used to update our cart. That means if the item is already present in the cart and we are trying to add it, it is just updating the quantity by 1. And if we are adding the new item, that is added into the existing cart. So if you go with any state management, we will require this kind of logic, right? So let me just comment this logic for now, and the other code we can remove. Let's remove this assistant dependency and remove all this code here. Now we will start installing Redux Toolkit and other required packages. So let me open the terminal, stop my application for now. Yes, and now let me install Redux Toolkit, and next package is React Redux, that is required to act as a bridge between your React application and Redux Toolkit. So Redux Toolkit will be redux.js/toolkit, and then we will install React Redux. Let's wait until these packages get installed. Yeah, the packages are installed successfully, and now we will start adding our logic in the store file. First, let's import the configure store method from Redux Toolkit, and that method is required to create our store, right? Yeah, and method name will be configure store. Yeah, it will be a configure store, and we will import it from @redux.js/toolkit. Let's configure our store now. For that, we'll use const. It will be a store here, and now we will use configure store method. It will take the object as a configuration, and it's having the property as a reducer. We can have multiple reducers here. For now, let's keep our store like this, and we will work on creating our slice now. Let's import create slice method from Redux Toolkit. This method will be required to create the slice for our application. Let me create that slice here. Again, we will use constant here, and we will give slice name of our application, maybe cart slice, right? Because we have cart application, or we are working on cart logic. So we'll give slice name as a cart slice, and it will be create slice, right? And this will take object as a configuration, and it will have three main properties. The first property will be name. In our case, we will give name as a cart here. Then second property will be initial state, and third property will be our reducers. Reducers will be object. Now we need to define our initial state here, and we will go with simple const initial state equal to, it will be object, and we will set our cart initially as a empty array. Hope you are clear till this. We're just working on simply creating our store and creating the slices. Now our slice gets created. Let's add the reducer to it. In our case, we need to add action here. And if you look at our application, we are working on updating our cart, right? Now we are making the changes in application. So this application is not working now. But if you following my video, when we click on add button, our cart gets updated, right? Basically, we are setting some data into our cart. And in this case, we will give our slice or our action name as a set cart here. It will be a function, and it is expecting state as a parameter here. And then we will update our state here. In this case, we will go state.cart for now. We will work on updating this logic, but for now, let's assign the same value to our cart. Now, when we talk about the create slice, right? The create slice is basically exposing the two things, your actions, and the second one is your reducer. Like when we going with large application, we can have multiple slices in general case, right? And in this approach, what basically we are doing, we are keeping each slice of our application into the different file. And when we are exporting few things from the slice, we are exporting the action as a named export, and we are exporting reducer as a default export. But in our case, like we are only going with single slice and we are keeping that inside our store file only. So we don't need to go with export it, but we just need to use some const to get our slices, right? And first thing will be set cart, right? Yeah, and we will take it from our cart slices dot actions. And then we need to also export our reducer. We will use default export, and what we will export, the card slices dot reducer. Yeah, but as I mentioned, we are writing our slice inside the store only, so we don't require this default export here. And we will get this reducer from here, and we will add it in our configure store option. Now, as I mentioned, we can add multiple reducers here, and we are going with cart reducer, right? Our reducer name as a cart reducer, and we are assigning the value of cart slices dot reducer here. Let me save this change. Now our store is ready. Like we created our store, we created our slice, and we started using our reducer inside the configure store. And now we need to use this store in the provider component, right? Like we need to import the provider component from React Redux, and then we need to pass our store to it. So instead of importing the providers in each application, what we will do, we will import the providers here, and we will create one function, and that function we will expose to outside world. Same way like we did it for our React context approach. In this case, let me import React first. Import React from React. Then we also need to import the provider now. Import provider. It will be a named export from React Redux. Yes, this is done. Now we will create our function here. That will basically take the component as a children props, and it will wrap it around that component. So it will be a function, and we will give name as a store provider. Then it will take the children as a props, and then we will just return provider here. It will be a provider. It will take store as a props. We will pass our store to it, and then we will use children here. Hope you clear with this logic. That means like instead of using the provider in application level, we are using it here, and we are just exporting one function, that is store provider. Instead of provider, we will use store provider now. Now our provider is ready, and next thing we need to use our state, that means our cart, as well as our action in the components, right? And instead of passing this data to component, what we will do, we will create one more custom hook, which will return the state or our cart as well as this set cart method. So let me create that function as well. We will export that function, and when we are creating the custom hook, we will start its name with use keyword, and in this case we are using our store. Now we need to return two things here. The first one is our cart, and second one is our set cart method or set cart action. And here we will add logic to fetch these details. Cart we will get from our store, and for that we will require use selector. And when we are dispatching the action, we will require use dispatch hook from React Redux, and then we can dispatch that action, right? So first import both use selector as well as use dispatch. We have imported both, and now we will use it here. So using the use selector is simple. We just need to use selector here. It will be a function. It will take state as a parameter, and it will just return our state. And in this case, we need to return state.cart. Then in second case, first we need to get the dispatch function in your const. For that, we will use dispatch, and we will get that from use dispatch. Also, let's cut this logic from here and create const for cart as well. And then we will use this logic here, and we will just use cart here as a shorthand property for our object. Now take this dispatch and we will use it here. Now here we need to create the action creator. It will be a function. Here we have dispatch function, and we just need to call the set cart method, right? That one we are getting from here. Let me copy this and use it here. Now, if you look at here, this is in use now. And I think our store is ready now with our store provider as well as use store. Now we need to export this store so that our child application can use it, right? And if you following along with my last video, if you go to our Webpack config file, we know we already exposing our store in the module federation plugin. We have exposed our store here. It will expose the store, and here we have file path. Now let's go to our child application, close the container, and if you go to common component and go to our Webpack config file, here we are using the container application, and we are setting the remote entry.js file. And that means we can access our store by using container/store now. Now let's go to the cart details component. Basically, in the cart details component, we have our add button, and when we click on that add button, we are calling the handle click method, and this handle click method call the set cart. Till now, we are using this set cart from use cart store. That was basically the part of our sustained store, but now we don't require this use cart store, right? Instead of this, we will use use store hook here. We will use store here, and it will basically return the set cart. Now, if you look at here, this set cart is taking the new item as argument. That means when I click on this add button, whatever the item we have, right, food item, that is passed as a argument to this cart. And somehow we need to access it here now. That means we are passing it from here, and if you go to our store, we need to use it, and then it will be a passed as a parameter here, and we can access it here. Once this is done, we will go to our set cart method in our slice, and if you look at here, along with this state, we will get new item here. Let me copy this and just do the console log, and we will see if we are getting our new item or not. Let's save these changes, save our cart details, and try to run our application now. If you go here and look for our child application, it is already running. Now let's run our parent application as well. For that, I will run npm start. Let's wait until it start. It's open our parent application, but it's giving me some error, right? And let's try to understand that error now. Let me close this and inspect the element. We will get more details here. If you go to console and look at here, it's saying that something is not a function in header component. Let me go to my header component. If you go to parent application and look for our components and header here, right? If you look at here, till now we are using the use cart store from our sustained logic. And now we also need to use this use store. Let me copy this. It will be a named export, and then use it here. That is done. We are basically importing or destructuring the cart from it. Let me save these changes. Our application run again, but still our application is not running, and let's see the error now. It's saying that could not find React Redux context value. Please ensure the component is wrapped in the provider. Error is very simple. We need to wrap our parent component around the provider to use the state value or store value. And if you look at our store, we already created our store provider here, and we are using the provider component inside it. And now we need to use this store provider in our application. Now, if you go to card details component, we can directly use this store provider here, or what we will do, we will use at parent level. That means if any of the components created in future, that provider should be available to that component as well. So let me use it here. This use store is not required. We will just use the store provider and wrap it around our card details component. Let me cut it. Let me use it here. Let's save this. We are using it here, but it's saying that the store provider is declared, but its value never used. And this is because when we are using the components, it should start with capital letter. Let me use capital S here, capital S here. We also import it as a capital letter, and from store, we will correct it value to capital S. I think it is working now. Yeah, it is working. Now go to card details component, and this store provider is not required here. Let me save the changes and now try to run our application. Our application still not working, and it's showing same error. We fixed this issue in our child component, but we need to also fix that issue in our parent component. Let's copy this line from our child component and let's go to our parent component app.js file. This is my container application, and if you go to app.js, we will import that store provider here as well. Let's copy this and use it around the layout component. Just cut it from here and add it here. This is done. And as I mentioned, in parent application, we also using the same instance of store. So instead of directly using the store file, we are importing our parent application from the remote entry file. That means our child application and parent application should share same instance of our store. Now let me close this and save the changes. And if I run our application now, it's still showing the error, and it's showing that cannot read the properties length of undefined. That means if you go to my header component and look for length here, right? We are using the length property here, and that's why it's giving the error. We will look into why this cart is giving error, but for now, let's assign the empty array to it so that we can see if our store is working or not. Let's refresh the page. Yeah, and now our application is working. If you go here, our application is start working, and we did good progress, right? Let me close all and just focus on store now. If you go to store, what we did, basically we are calling the set cart method and we are passing some data to it. That means when I go to my child application and look for cart details component, we are passing new item as a data to it, and we are trying to print that data in our store. So let's see if we are getting that data first. That means when I click on this add button, whatever the item we have here, that should be logged in console. Yeah, we are getting error, and it's saying that set cart is not a function. Let me understand what mistake we did. We are setting our cart here, new item we are passing here, and if you go down, why this state cart is not in used? Let me go down and look for our use store logic. Yeah, here we did mistake, right? While copy pasting, instead of using the new item here, we use our set cart method. So let me save these changes, and now our set cart is in use, right? Let's save this and refresh our application one more time, and now try to click on add button. Yeah, now we get something in our console, and it's saying that it is having the type of cart with set cart, and it is passing the payload to it, and in payload we get those details. This is basically our action. In action we are passing two things. The first one will be a type and the second one will be payload. Now if you go here and instead of using the new item, if you use payload here, we should get new item now. Yeah, we are at least getting the new item here. Now let's move to the header component and fix the issue related to cannot read properties of undefined. Here we have set the default value to empty array, which fix our issue. But now let's understand the exact issue. And here exactly we are getting that error, right? We are trying to set the length of the cart, and in our case, like we are not getting this cart variable as an array. If you go to our store and look for the initial value of cart, it will be empty, and that should work. But I think we made some mistake while assigning that value. Let me go below and see from where exactly we're assigning the cart value. Yeah, here we have the cart and we're using use selector. And here we are trying to directly read the cart value from state, and that is incorrect. Because if you go to our store and look for the reducers, right, here we can have the multiple reducers, and whatever state related to that reducer store under that particular field in the object. That means if we have state related to cart variable, that will be stored under the cart reducer dot. So let me copy this, and if you go below, here we have state dot cart. So instead of that, we will use state dot cart reducer dot cart, and it should fix our issue. Let me save these changes, and let's go to Chrome again. Our application is working now, right? Till now, we are getting the 0 value. That is fine. When I add the data on the item, it is working fine. We reached till this point. We did the great progress on Redux. We created our store. We expose a couple of method. One is basically use store and another one is store provider. And we used this logic in child application as well as parent application. And from child now we are getting this data in parent store by using Redux. And now we need to work on final step, right? We somehow get this data, but as I mentioned, we have some logic to update our cart, right? If existing item is already present in the cart, what we are doing, we are just updating its quantity. But if that item is not available in the cart, we are just appending the new item with already present cart. Now let me cut this cart update logic from here, and we will add it under our set cart method. These statements are not needed anymore. Instead of paste the cart update logic, and if you look at here, we have a new item that is returning two things for now. One is action and second one is payload. And in payload, we have our actual item. So let's extract it or destructure payload from our new item, and we will use it. Now replace this payload wherever we are using new item, here as well as down. Let's save the changes. The first thing is done. Now we have return statement here. This return statement was needed when we are working on Zustand, but in case of Redux, that is not needed anymore, and we can directly assign the cart value here. It will be a state.cart, and the same when we are going with else case. It will be again state.cart, and we will go with equal to value. Let me save these changes, and our application should work as expected with cart now. Let me add one item. The item is added into the cart. It's having the value 1. Let me add it one more time. It is updated with 2. And now add fresh item. That is updated with first value. That is 1. Let me try to add a few more time and the value gets updated here. And that's how our cart is working as expected. This is great, right? We successfully implemented Redux or Redux Toolkit in our micro frontend ecosystem. Now, as I mentioned, we know that we cannot update our state directly, right? So when we are going with Redux, we cannot use the equal to keyword. But when we are going with Redux Toolkit, we can do that because we are using the immer library behind, and that will take care of mutating our state as per the standard of Redux. This is the complex concept, and we are required much more configuration in our Redux store. But if you're familiar with Redux or Redux Toolkit, understanding these things will be really simple. Now let's understand one last point in short. If you are working with micro frontend, we need to focus on where exactly we can keep our store, right? If our micro frontend is small and limited to couple of applications only, we can keep store in container application itself. The same approach that we tried today. We keep store in container application, and then same store is used by container application as well as child application. But if we have multiple micro frontends and we are frequently updating our store, then keeping store as a central place is a good option. That means we can keep our store as a separate application, and then that application can be accessed by parent as well as all the required child. So for now, we have only two application. One is container and one is child. But in future, we can have more child application and they can easily access the store. So this is basically the approach. We can go with store in the container application itself or store as a complete separate application to manage the store as a central entity. I think that's all for today's video. Finally, I will push the code of today's implementation to the GitHub. You can try to implement by it your own. If you face any issues, you can clone the repository and see the implementation. I will suggest try to do as much as implementation so that you will get more understanding around the micro frontend and gets more knowledge around this state management concept in the micro frontend. I think that's all about the current video. Finally, if you are enjoying my videos, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It takes lots of effort to create these videos, and sharing them with your friends helps them to reach more people. Your support really means a lot to me. Thank you for watching and see you in next one. Till now, thank you. Bye.